The Broken Blueprint Part 3. The Crisis Extends Nationwide. The 1923 Colorado Conference. In response to this emergency, while some of our colleges waited to see what would happen, others had their junior college work accredited by the associations so they could graduate men and women qualified to attend Loma Linda. By the early 1920s, the General Conference felt something had to be done about the matter. It was decided that an educational conference must be convened. At the World Educational Convention held at Colorado Springs, Colorado on June 5 to 19, 1923, Elder Warren E. Howell, president of CME from 1906 to 1907 and secretary of the General Conference Department of Education from 1918 to 1930, laid out the facts which had led up to this crisis. In our Educational Convention of 1910, a warning was sounded, which was not altogether untimely, against the menace of a disease, then called universititis. What was then a possible 2 or 3 isolated cases has since become epidemic. The very psychology of building up our standards to match those of the educational world seemed to breed the ideal that if we were going to measure up to the standards of the world in our teaching, we must resort to the world for our training and our standing to reach up to those standards. In other words, since we were taught to have no grindstones of our own, Israel must go down to the Philistines to sharpen every man his share, and his coulter, and his axe, and his mattock. 1 Samuel 13, verse 20. While the logic of this reasoning must be admitted, its fallacy lies in the false premise that we ever meant to adopt the world's standards or its methods of reaching them. Our aim was to produce educational values equivalent to, and in our own estimation much superior to, anything the world gives. We should not dare to make such an assumption of superiority were we not dependent on the principles and methods of education that God has graciously given us. To the extent that we live up to these, shall we have that prosperity and good success in true education vouchsafed to all God's children through Joshua 1 verse 8, at a crucial time in Israel's history. While our teachers were resorting to centers of learning in increasing numbers, followed to no small degree by student graduates and undergraduates, a new menace arose from an unexpected quarter. Wisely or unwisely, our medical college had linked up with an organization which assumed the task of defining and dictating standards for medical schools, with a view of eliminating incompetent institutions. While the step we took looked innocent enough at first, the inevitable result of tying up an institution of our own with an organization of entirely different aims soon showed itself in a surprising way. A new standard was promulgated, requiring that all entrants to a standard AMA-approved medical college should present their credits from a school that was registered as standard by an association of educators who had assumed a similar task of standardizing literary schools. From that day to this, the idea has been kept before our educators of registering our colleges in a secular standardizing association, thus tying them by much more than a thread to the educational policies of those who do not discern the voice of God and who will not hearken to his commandments. See Medical Ministry, pages 61 to 62. Only 2 colleges have taken such a step, on the most moderate scale that could be discovered, that of registering only the junior college department. Where this step will lead these schools and others that may take it, only he who reads the future as well as the past can predict. It would almost seem like tying ourselves to the tail of a kite to be carried whither the holder of the string may list, seemingly in the direction of less efficiency to serve the cause of God. Warren Howell, Review, September 12, 1923. In that same presentation, Elder Howell, one of our ablest educational men and deeply faithful to the blueprint, said this to the assembled group. The spirit of prophecy says our schools are to be like no other schools in existence, and the schools we shall establish in the closing years of the message are to be of an entirely different order from those we have established. There is too much clinging to old customs, and because of this we are far behind where we should be in the development of the third angel's message. God has been waiting long and pleading long for us to believe in His way of education and practice it 100% in our schools. Too long we have been dawdling with the evanescent theories of men about education. Too long we have been dealing with the artificial standards set up by men who do not discern the voice of God, much less His matchless plan for building character and making missionaries. We are pursuing too largely the liberal arts aim of mental discipline and culture, with too meager provision for the practical arts of everyday life and for building character and making missionaries. M. E. Howell, quoted in W. E. Straw, Rural Sociology and Adventist Education History, published by Madison College in 1961, quoted earlier in Review, September 12, 1923. In his presentation, Elder Howell then listed 5 Spirit of Prophecy points. 1. Limit the study of books to the strictly spiritual and useful. 2. Maintain for all students a full balance of useful labor and the teaching of the vocations participated in by both teachers and students. 3. Give large place and equal balance to actual training in missionary service during the school period, adapted to the age and ability of the young people, and likewise shared by both teachers and students. 4. Maintain school homes for all non-resident students. 5. Carry on the entire program in a rural environment where land can be cultivated far enough from the city to escape its diverting and corrupting influences, but within range of suitable population for missionary training field. On these 5 commandments hang all the law and the prophets in God's plan of education. Review, September 12, 1923. Elder Straw, who was also present at that 1923 Educational Council, made this comment. Elder Howell then made a strong appeal for a return to the blueprint in our educational work. 3 men bitterly opposed what was presented. The 3 men who opposed the presentation later not only quit teaching in our schools, but left the message and died out of the truth. W. E. Straw, Rural Sociology and Adventist Education History.